Good morning, dear listeners. Welcome to Klaipėdos Nafta Investor Conference. I'm Emilia from Nasdaq Vilnius, and I'll be moderating today's event. We will start with a presentation from the management, which will be followed by the Q&A session. Please be informed that this webinar is being recorded. As always, I encourage every one of you to ask questions during or after the presentation in the Q&A section. With that said, I'm pleased to introduce today's presenters, Chief Executive Officer Darius Šilenskis and Chief Financial Officer Mindaugas Kvekšas. Dear guests, please, the floor is yours and good luck.
Good morning to everyone. Good morning, Milda. It's the first time for us doing presentation in Zoom platform. I think it's really good choice of Nasdaq because that extends opportunities for the wider list of participants to join and then to listen for the main messages. And today, as usually, we will present the main highlights for the Q1 of 2022, and we will share with all of you financial results of the company for the same period. So I will start from the main announcements from the last webinar, meaning using a timeline not only within the Q1. On 3rd of March, we probably were the first company in Lithuania which denied acceptance of Russian molecules of liquefied natural gas in our terminal by reacting to the war in Ukraine and by not supporting any Russian revenue generation, at least here in our infrastructure from LNG transshipment. So further on, what was happening, and actually it was really quite an intense period for KN as operating critically important infrastructure of natural gas supply. So it was intense period, and we on 17th of March had already booked all our FSRU terminal capacities for the current gas year, meaning till end of September 2022. And accordingly, it was the total amount of let's say regasification forecasted till this period. Within this period will reach almost 24 terawatt hours. Another important thing to say that we have agreed with the regulator and had collected all needed approvals on amending our annual capacity allocation procedure and principles applied for our LNG terminal capacity allocation for the last quarter of 2022. So later on, we have also agreed with a regulator on revised tarification, so to say, of the regasification services. And as of May 2022, the tariff for the variable tariff component is defined in a level of 1.19 euros for megawatt hour. Of course, sustainability, social responsibility report, as usually, has been released. So I'm recommending for our investors to get no acknowledgement with the content of this document, because I think nowadays it's especially important to have not only, let's say, figures, but as well understanding on what company does in area of ESG and social responsibility. So another important message to say that on 8th of April, our case regarding shares to our employees as a part of remuneration for previous periods, it has been dismissed by the Šiauliai Regional Court. and the prosecutor provided actually appeal on a higher, how to say, court instance in this civil case. So we also must say that I think it's important event for entire company and investors. We have a completely new board of directors with Edvinas Katilius chairing this new board of directors. Let's say for the oncoming four years. I'm really glad the competences which we got. I'm really glad the diversity which we have in our new board, and I really believe we will have smooth, let's say, smooth cooperation and smooth work together in order to improve our returns to all our shareholders. And another important thing regarding capacity allocation for our LNG terminal. So we have approval from the regulator applicable for 2023 reservations of let's say, regasification capacities. So those are the main announcements which were released. A few other highlights to be mentioned. So we took the 33rd place in the top 500 ranking of Lithuanian business leaders, which is not so bad for a company size like ours. I think it's quite a good result. We have reached 1,500 trucks loaded in our small-scale LNG relating station starting 2017, meaning that this infrastructure works quite well, and our strategic partner utilizes our capacities for the supply mainly of north and northeast region of Poland to the off-grid customers. Yeah, and finally, we finalized the construction together with port authorities of the additional jetty in our Klaipėdos oil terminal. So it's important and significant achievement because it gives more flexibility for our customers, and this jetty is really actively used for the discharge and loading of various tankers, including chemical ones from the very beginning of when it became available. And another important thing to mention is that the government of Lithuania approved that our FSRU Independence, which ownership will pass to KN starting 2025, will be registered at Lithuanian ship's flag register. So I think it is important since this FSRU is a symbol of our independence, energy independence. So quite a big achievement. And another significant event which took place recently is an opening of a GIPL gas interconnector between Lithuania and Poland, which in the light of recent challenges and changes of the gas supply due to the Russian war in Ukraine gives additional security to not only to Poland, but as well Lithuanian and even Baltic markets. So those are the main messages in the slide. Important things to address and to mention, but immediately from the, let's say, first days of a newly selected board of directors came in. So we started a process of KN strategy, a new strategy actually preparation for the long term. And the idea is not only define the exact goals for our core businesses, which we are doing now, but also to define KN place in the future energy world and actually a pathway how we get to the net zero. And it is a top priority for all my team for remaining to 2022 year. So, and as I mentioned, process has been already initiated and started. Talking about the war impact, I think it's important to share with investors how it has impacted us so far. So no negative material impact is being visible, and no some indications on impairment arising from revised business consumptions is appearing. Of course, we are spending a lot of our time and resources to strengthen our operational security, cyber security, and continuity of our operations. So this is under control, and management is working on newly appeared opportunities in terms of global LNG development, and as most of you know, Europe is actively looking on alternative supplies and to become less dependent or at the end completely independent from the Russian gas supplies. So our know-how and let's say our capabilities allows us to think that we might have some success in helping one or other country to build infrastructure which we are operating and which we know how to build. So this is one. And another thing, it's not written in this slide, but we are quite actively working on let's say opportunities to supply petroleum products by using our infrastructure to the Ukrainian market. Talking about our regional development of LNG, so I briefly mentioned, nevertheless, let's say we have a quite active regasification activities and actually operating on a maximum regime from beginning of April. This will not have a significant impact on our financial so-called normalized and adjusted profit. Why? Because it is a regulated activity, and the differences or the surpluses are balanced later by the regulator. So this is a key messages from myself, and I would like to pass stage to Mindaugas to go more into more details talking about the figures.
Thank you, Darius. So it's a great relief to see the huge efforts of our team finally paying off. And we believe we have seen the beginning of a stronger positive trend of recovery in the financial results starting from the beginning of this year. While last year, throughout the 4 quarters, we have seen the financial performance that was relatively stable. Finally, this quarter, we are seeing, as I said, a stronger trend and a visible improvement in all key financial indicators, which improved both in comparison to the last quarter of 2021 and also in comparison to the first quarter of previous year. So the non-adjusted net loss, which is reported according to the requirements of IFRS, was again impacted by further depreciation of euro against the United States dollar, and we incurred an unrealized foreign exchange loss of 4.2 million euros less deferred taxes. Such losses arise from a lease liability for FSRU, floating storage regasification unit, that is denominated in the United States dollars. And since these lease payments are fully compensated by the regulated income, either of the current year or the future periods, therefore our approach is not to hedge against this risk in 2022. Worth reminding that in 2020, we had the opposite situation, and the company recognized significant unrealized currency exchange gains due to the same reason. And so we also measure for the management purposes the indicators that take into account so-called temporary regulatory differences, and this is a common practice among other regulated enterprises operating in the energy sector in Lithuania. And these temporary regulatory differences, they take into account they are adjusting for amounts such as costs which were incurred in excess of revenue in the regulated LNG terminal segment that should be compensated in the future periods. Or it could also be the revenue in excess of costs incurred that are eligible for compensation. Such excess revenue should be paid back in the future periods. Accordingly, in the first quarter of this year, the EBITDA adjusted for such temporary regulatory differences would amount to 8.1 million euros. So this would be a slight reduction of the normal non-adjusted EBITDA by 0.3 million euros. And while last year our performance was significantly affected by recognition of a huge impairment loss for Klaipėdos oil terminal assets, and despite the recent terrible events in Ukraine and their long-reaching consequences, we have not identified, as Darius mentioned, any indications of additional impairment at the recent reporting date for neither of the segments where we operate. Then how the individual segments were performing in the first quarter of this year in comparison to the last quarter of 2021. So overall, revenue increased by 2.4 million euros, and as I said, in comparison to the last quarter of the previous year. And 0.5 million euros comes from the oil terminal segment, mostly from further diversification of the client base and also the transshipped goods portfolio. And 2 million euros of additional revenue comes from LNGT as regulated revenues. In respect of EBITDA, the improvement was of 2.7 million euros. And of that, 1 million euros coming from the oil segment, mostly achieved by growth in revenue and the reductions in fixed costs, despite great inflationary pressure. Variable costs of the energy and the railway were at the same level as in Q4 of the last year. And 1.7 million euro improvement coming from regulated segment, mostly due to higher revenue, as costs remain at a similar level. Relatively low EBITDA in last quarter of 2021 was affected by the mentioned temporary regulatory differences. And if we take these differences into account for both periods, then the growth in EBITDA for the regulated segment would amount to 0.4 million euros. And last, the performance of commercial LNG segment remained at a relatively similar level, and we expect improvements in the future, as also Darius mentioned. Our team is actively involved in all the turmoil that is going on in the LNG market and the global LNG market at the moment. And last, the net profit loss. In respect of the net profit loss, it's important to mention that finally in quarter one of 2022, none of the segments were loss-making this year, after we will eliminate the mentioned unrealized currency exchange losses of the regulated segment. And then going back to the overview of the business factors for separate segments. Darius?
Yeah, thank you, Mindaugas. So very shortly about each segment, the key highlights and messages. So talking about the oil segment, since we are really dependent as well on the macroeconomical and fundamental factors in oil markets. So what was going on in Q1, and it was, let's say, record high refining margins period, which due to many reasons, which actually listed in this slide, of course, caused partially as well due to war effect, and disruptions appeared from as a consequence. So those factors had a positive impact for our transshipment in Klaipėdos terminal. And comparing with last quarter of 2021, we were seeing an increase of 5% approximately on our handled volumes or transshipped volumes amount. Of course, transshipment is not reflecting the full, let's say, full scope of our revenues and other revenues we are collecting as well from such services as a storage. So in storage services, let's say the global demand remained quite low because there was no contango in none of the oil product segments during entire Q1. And it was only continuing backwardation tendencies, which means that we were not accumulating some extra or additional revenues from the storage services. Nevertheless, it's worth to say that our Subačius oil terminal, where we store state reserves of fuels, as well having some commercial activity where it's fully utilized, 100% utilization, and yeah, we are performing quite well by utilizing this infrastructure. Another additional products which appeared in our terminal after the finalization of the investment program, both into tank farms and the jetties, as I already mentioned, is giving a return. And we can see almost in all so-called petrochemical, chemical, and other grades of oil products increase. So it was about 5.5 times higher transshipment of ethanol in our Klaipėdos infrastructure comparing to the same period of last year. We are doing really well with bitumen, and our share among the Baltic terminals, including Russian actually ports, let's say the share is quite significant. We have about 41% of this, and yeah, we have also increase of petrochemical activities, and we already reached about 40% within one quarter. We reached about 48% of the total last year's volume, which was handled in our infrastructure. And yeah, it's maybe good thing to say that we added into our, let's say, list of services which we provide Lithuanian crude oil. It's not a significant amounts of that crude oil coming, but still we are utilizing our idle capacities pretty well, and all possible products which we can find in our markets, we are trying to attract them and handle them. So this is about oil. Some of the messages about regulated LNG activities has been already shared. What is worth to mention that our average utilization of Klaipėdos LNG terminal here, we can see 31%, but it's worth to mention that before the war, due to the very high prices in the markets and due to very high levels of natural gas indexes, let's say year started with I would say very poor utilization, but nevertheless, after the war in Ukraine started, we are operating almost on technological maximum capacities, which exceeds even 90% of technological capacities level. So about the booking, we already told for the remaining gas year. Also about the ban to import LNG, Russian origin LNG, it's already mentioned. So I think those are the main messages about the regulated activities. So we can switch to commercial activities. It's worth to still to underline what we include. We include our small scale reloading station. We include our operation of the LNG terminal in Suport, and it also includes another projects globally, including as well consultancy services. So we can see here that the Q1 was on a neutral or very slight negative zone in terms of bottom line. But it's worth to mention that especially in our Brazilian operations, we are seasonal, and this power plant, which is supplied by natural gas, and we are part of it, usually is used for power generation during the summer season, or in the southern hemisphere it's a winter season, when there is less rain, and the Brazilian energy market is very dependent on a hydropower. So what we expect improvement in the second half of a year, and we expect still to have profitable activities in overall profitable activities in a commercial LNG segment. So Mindaugas, that's all from me. I'm passing back the word to you.
Thank you, Darius. Now, as I already introduced the financial results of Q1, so in respect of the key performance indicators, finally we are seeing the EBITDA margin coming closer to the average EBITDA margin for the last several years. We still have a gap of several percentage points to close, but hopefully the trend that we saw in Q1 2022 will continue, and we will manage to achieve that. And while in the slide deck that we published this morning for this presentation, we include the definition of alternative performance measures, also the return on equity and return on assets. As we are measuring those by taking the net result for the last 12 months, therefore the profit of the first quarter of 2022 is not directly reflected in these ratios for the first quarter of 2022, because these are significantly impacted by the significant impairment loss that was recognized last year. And in respect of our statement of financial position, we are not seeing much changes in Q1, except for a small change in our capital structure, as we took the loan to finance the security supplement reduction mechanism in the regulated segment, as we were doing for the last 2 years. And other than that, our financial position remains quite stable. And this ends our presentation, and Emilia, word back to you.
Thank you very much for the comprehensive presentation, and now we will proceed with the Q&A part. So please feel free to send in your questions in the Q&A box of your screen. The first question would be, does Klaipėdos Nafta see itself in providing O&M or any other services for Finland, Estonia LNG terminal? Which of the projected LNG terminals in Europe are the most attractive for Klaipėdos Nafta to propose its operations services? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Emilia. So actually, we are looking into all opportunities which appears, especially when we talk about Europe. Europe is our home market, I would say, and actually 2 out of 3 FSRUs, meaning floating LNG terminals, we were very closely involved, and one is which we are going to become an owner soon. So really unique experience and really unique value proposition can be generated to any of the, let's say, upcoming floating LNG terminals across the Europe, because Europe meets our risk appetite, Europe meets our, let's say, all the criteria which is a part of our global development, global LNG development strategy. So by protecting confidentiality commitments against our customers or potential customers, I will not go into the details in which of those we are focusing the most, but the general comment is that we can be a part and by creating a value to any of those new appearing opportunities in Europe.
Thank you very much for your answer. So another question would be, are there any results, decisions of Seimas Economics Committee after their visit to Klaipėdos nafta?
Well, yeah, I mean, intention of the visit was not itself to do or take any decisions. It was probably more to get aware about the actual topics due to the dramatically changed situation actually in the markets and caused by war. So I think we answered all the questions. I think what we heard that we have support in all the areas and important topics regarding assurance of energy security of Lithuania by using our infrastructure.
Thank you very much for your answer. So as all the questions are answered, on behalf of Klaipėdos Nafta and Nasdaq Vilnius, thank you everyone for joining us today. It was our pleasure to present these results. The recording of the presentation will be available in the company's website and Nasdaq Baltic YouTube channel. Dear guests, thank you very much and have a good day, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.